Hello, Ray. How's it going?
Oh, you seen another week, another podcast.
People really love our podcast, and we're starting to get more and more positive comments, and people stop calling us boring.
That's just because they don't know us yet.
Now, maybe people will start calling us controversial by next week because today we got a very controversial topic in the tech community, and that is Xano versus Supabase. And I think no matter on which side we are on, we'll try to be as centered as possible, but I think we'll always upset some people.
Mm-hmm.
But today we want to try to talk as much as we can about the facts and actually see what real Xano users are saying about it and how Xano is actually empowering people that have never touched code before, at least at that extent that you can do within Xano, to empower them to turn their experience, their business knowledge into products and software out there and automate processes. So how do you want to start this exciting topic today?
Well, let me ask you this. How did you decide that this was the topic you wanted to be covering today?
Oh, I had like a complete beef going on in the Total Discord about Xano versus Supabase. So
Oh, now we need to hear about the beef. By the way, it's not Toddle anymore. This is a Nord Stream beef. So we're talking about
not Nord Stream, Nordcraft.
Nordcraft, right? Nord Stream is something else. But yeah, no, we Vikings and longboats and hats with horns. Like I want to hear what a beef is like in the Nordcraft Discord.
It's a hot topic. Whenever you start mentioning Supabase and Xano in one sentence, you're going to. I was making a comment. I was like, I'm looking for YouTube videos. I'm running out of ideas as I haven't posted in a week. Do you have any ideas of videos I can do that do not include Supabase? I shouldn't have sent that comment. I agree. That was a mistake. I did send it. 120 comments later, we found a way to calm down that conversation. So You've been looking at that kind of technology. You've been doing this for 25 years. So I was like, I'm just moving around since 5 years here. So how about we'll get the expert and we'll shed some light into the darkness and see what's actually going on. Maybe it's something, maybe it's not even Supabase or Xano. Maybe it's Supabase and Xano, or it's you do Supabase, you do Xano, and I'll do this, So I want to get with your knowledge in there to kind of like, de-explode that situation.
Yeah, there are the Xano, I think, positions itself, and I think this is a marketing mistake they make. They position themselves, in opposition to Supabase. The Supabase is a wonderful database backend, highly programmable. They've got great SDKs, but they have services that go beyond just the database part. But really, at their center, they're a merchant of bits, right? You store stuff in your Supabase database, and they originally came out in opposition, I think, to Firebase, right? That's the reason why they call themselves Supabases, or that became they were at the time like an open source alternative using PostgreSQL, and now they are, they got their multi-billion-dollar valuation and all sorts of good stuff. And then, Xano comes along, and Xano wasn't really designed to solve the same set of problems. It's, what you're really getting with Xano is like this virtual machine, right? It's a little bit more like renting a droplet from DigitalOcean, except it has stuff built on top of it and its own, management sitting on top. And one of the things it includes is a database, a little PostgreSQL database, so using the same basic technology that Supabase does. But its thing is offering easier integration with their NoCode, function stack environment. So that function stack is, I think, where they really shine. But because they're coming into the market, sort of helping with people doing app building, they position themselves as being, hey, a back end and a front end. And the idea is that you could have your WeWeb or whatever front end, and then you'd be able to go to a Supabase back end, just database, or go to a Xano back end. which is, also has its database. But I think looking at it that way kind of misses where each of them are really great, because Supabase is a super high performance, super scalable PostgreSQL database that's fully featured and does a really good job. And Xano has the database that's sort of sitting inside this machine that you just rented. But what it really has is the ability to manage all the logic that sits between the database and when it leaves that particular machine, as opposed to just running queries on it. And I think that thicker part of the back end, that brain that's on the server side, is where they really shine. So that, and to your point from before, yeah, sure, people can and do use Xano for the logic and then use some Supabase for the backend storage, or something else for the backend storage, or actually many other stories for doing that too. Because the place where Xano is most special is not in the part where it just competes with Supabase, which is data storage. It's really in that function stack.
We do also see a photo of the function stack right now on the screen. And there's actually a photo of the first API that I built for Despia. It actually manually went, you can take a look at that, still on my IP. It went on your URL and it scraped your HTML file and it got your CSS file and got your JavaScript file, and it put it back together, but without you having to host it. Because the first idea of Despia was, how about we host it for you, what's on your site, so we can bill you by users. And then I was like, oh, it costs money for us to bill you by users, so we gave that idea up. Because enforcing that costs more money than actually, it wasn't worth it enforcing it at the end of the day. But that was the first endpoint that I ever built for Despia.
So cool.
It's kind of like a sacred almost thing. Like, it's the first thing I've built in Xano that really made me sweat. With you see four Lambda functions right after each other.
Yeah, which is less scary than it used to be, thankfully, in that system. But
this is the old version, by the way. This was scary. I think I have somewhere like a 30-second delay just to do some load balancing.
Yeah. No, yeah, and I think this kind of thing, this kind of complexity that you're handling in there, that is totally where it is strong. You do the same thing with Make or Zapier. You're spending a lot more time sort of bending over backwards, deal with the connection between these services. Whereas what Xano's doing is what you're doing, extract data, make these API calls, transform that data, ship it somewhere else.
I think those things are two separate things. I think right now, when you take a look at what people are building, most people are building some sort of AI application. Whenever someone builds a SaaS, you usually have some engine going on, and that is your secret sauce of your business. That's where your IP is. And I think Xano is a great way where you can have a place where you don't need to necessarily be that technical, but you need to understand your expertise of that engine and how you can turn that engine into a product, to an API that can be served to your users. That's where it's really great at. And we're going to even have some special guests today. We'll bring in them a little bit later on to see how they're using that and how they actually get empowered by Xano. But the tremendous thing that I think is when you, for example, Silman, I hope one day we can have him in here as well. He has this amazing AI engine to turn, text into full commercials with voiceover, with everything. And he's using Xano as his, central point of logic for those pipelines. And I think you should see Xano more as a pipeline rather than a database, because it's not that good of a database. It's good for most use cases. But if you are building the biggest to-do application in the world, you probably should build this in Supabase and not in Xano. But if you're building an AI that comes up with things for you to do and has a proprietary engine doing that and needs to do the data entries automatically, you probably want to go with Xano, because you can build this proprietary engine very simple in such a function stack that's just easy to configure. And it just looks scary because in the condensed view, but it's way simpler if you go to the expanded view.
Yeah, I really like the word engine that you just used there, because an engine is defined by its moving parts.
Yes.
And so the parts that are in here are things that have action, that get you from point A to point B. You're using the pipeline, but really we're talking about getting things, making motion, right?
Exactly.
Whereas database's job really is to hang on to things and hold still. and then deliver things back. But like it's largely about being static. And I think when you're in that more action orientation, or when there's more to be done, Xano does really well. That's why the to-do list is a really good example of, I mean, it's a silly example, right? But it's an example like the kind of thing that Supabase is particularly good at, because in the case of a to-do list, you're going to add to it, you're going to remove from it, you mark it, you update it, mark it as done. It's like very, we call it CRUD, create, read, update, delete. In terms of your relationship with the data, it doesn't require a whole lot of thinking in between. All the thinking is being done by the human. When you need thinking to be done by the machine, that's where you need to be doing more logic. And the question is, how do you express that logic? And I think it's just worth saying for a minute that like neither of us work for Xano. This podcast isn't being sponsored by Xano. The reason we're talking about things the way that we are is that we're both running these communities and like help people who are trying to build meaningful applications, workflows, systems that are creating real business value. And the thing we found is that there's an element you need to be able to store stuff, but an even bigger element that you need to be able to have the machine do stuff. Because if you just have the user do stuff, well, then all you've done is like shuffle things around in terms of where the user does work. But but the core of automation is that it has to have an engine, that this thing is moving autonomously. And the way that it moves autonomously is going to be through this kind of logic. And there are a limited number of ways that you can do that. I mean, if I would say that prior to 2021, the leading way of doing that kind of logic was probably to write a Lambda, like in AWS, and do serverless function, which was has its own kind of challenges to it. Before Lambdas, it was actually even more challenging. You had to go deploy a virtual machine and go get that done. But now there are more options, and Xano's not the only one, but it's a pretty good one. There's interesting question of like what's going to be the right option 90 days from now. But certainly, talking about Xano is a way for us to talk about this piece that matters, which is how do you get the machine to do work for you?
And how do you build engines that are proprietary to your business? Because that's actually where the IP is, and where you're going to be different than anybody else vibe coding their application. Because if you're going to go to ChatGPT and you're going to build an edge function, it's going to call ChatGPT and it's going to just do whatever AI knows how to do with it. How is that different from someone I can build myself? If you come up with a proprietary idea and you use Xano to express this idea, you're not a programmer, but you're going to express that idea that comes from your domain expertise, build this engine. I think I just made that word up, and I think it's a great word for what Xano is doing. You built this engine, this business engine, doing this technology for your business, working with leads, working with AI, working with whatever, and you can commercialize that. And you could even then use Xano and add some authentication to your endpoint to actually sell that API to other people, which is also possible in Xano, which is
also awesome. True. We have a comment in from BLN Freak, who has, I think, is making a really useful point about Supabase and coming on the other side of the argument. I think that this is worth thinking about, That he's using Supabase for, we talk about price and SQL logic because it does the SQL part well, And so the question is like, where does that brain happen? And he's talking about using the brain with N8N, which is an automation platform, and handling authentication through configuration, which is what's called row level security. That's what RLS stands for in the comment. And which is sort of a different mental model for dealing with authentication, and it's a perfectly reasonable thing. Some people find that very comfortable. But it definitely shows that in all these cases we're thinking about how do we handle the automation part, and do you handle it through so Xano has one approach to handling it that I find pretty compelling. N8N has some really good stuff and is now much more AI native. So particularly doing LangChain-ish stuff, it's very can be really cool. And there are other options, like I've seen people also using make.com in the back end for being.
Andreas suggested that today, that you can use Supabase and Make. That would be a good combination.
Yeah, so we shouldn't give the impression there's only one way to do something. It is but it does, but having decided what the problem is, which is there's storage, there's logic, and then there's the front end, the user experience, and it's that middle part that I think doesn't get quite enough attention. And in this case, the real choice isn't Supabase versus Xano; it's going to be N8N versus Xano. And then what are sort of the reasonable choices and what are the trade-offs as you're going among those?
Yes. Also, there's a difference. I think when you start your business, you're going to work two-dimensional. when you step into errors, you're going to start being three-dimensional. This is the
Okay.
difference between using Zapier to get data from something and doing a loop in Xano. And from my understanding, the last time I used N8N, that was a year ago. But from my understanding, N8N is very good at being two-dimensional. You can go on all kinds of different ways on that two-dimensional space. But when you need to go with loops, when you need to go with for loops, while loops, for each loops, this is, I think, from my experience at least, from using Make and Zapier, this is mostly where those systems fall apart and where you start feeling what else is out there, and that's how I found Xano.
Yeah. Well,
and I first found you because I was like on the Xano forum, like this is like I tried it myself, and I was like, how do I do this thing? And like if you start Xano, the first week is full of rage against whoever built this, and then it gets better. And when you find Ray,
yes, and having met the man who built it, I certainly appreciate that feeling. No, Sean's a wonderful person. But I do think there's like your point about dimensions. I thought was a really good one, and this idea of looping. And there's also a question like where the incentives are. So
yeah.
N8N neat one because N8N has like a self-hosting option in addition to having like just sort of cloud-based hosting. And then you look at like Make and you look at Zapier, both of which are basically selling things by the action, right? They're on a meter. And in both those cases, one of the reasons why looping is so challenging in these circumstances is because they are designed to minimize the amount of compute that you're really spending. Right, so they want everything to run as fast as possible because they want to get more of those actions and spend fewer dollars on the compute, and that's which is reasonable in terms of their incentives. But it becomes why the loops are hard, because if they loop, then they need to spend more on compute. In fact, they created something that maybe it's not going to end for a long, long time. And how do I manage that? How do I make that work? Right. So one of the neat things about Xano is that it has that. I was talking about like it being a virtual machine. You have your own virtual machine. That is simultaneously the thing that actually kind of constrains you when you're trying to scale, because you need to go buy the next machine up. Right. It's not like it doesn't scale smoothly. It sort of goes stepwise. But the other thing is, like, in the context of having that machine, they're like, hey, crunch all you want. Do as much as you want in here. It's your machine. It doesn't cost us anymore for you to be using that machine heavily versus lightly, because it's the same. They're way.
If you work with load balancing in Xano, and if you find creative ways to do things, I found you can save lots of money if you're very creative in how you structure things in Xano, if you structure them correctly. The most common performance killer in Xano is user error, actually. Not configuring. Of course, always. But like I've seen things that have a loop in 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 a loop, and I was like, you can just use the filter function instead and save your loopity loopity loop.
Yeah, that idea of just being able to crunch all you want, I think is the whole thing of being serverless versus servered, or versus being what's called instance based. And that question of like how you want to use your system is one going to drive what your bills are going to be, but also kind of explains why these things price the way they do. Because since Xano is giving like, hey, you've got your own machine, they need to charge you for a machine, right? And that sort of is driving their economics. Whereas Make, for example, could be like as cheap as like $9 a month or something when it starts, and you can do a whole lot with it without having to pay much because they are limiting the amount of compute, which is keeping down their expenses relative to you. So when you start, you cost them nothing. You do a little bit, they cost you a very small amount. Whereas with Xano, you could not use it at all, but still cost them the same amount because they have to put that machine in place for you.
We got one comment. I want to look at that, and then we're going to get some guests inside of here and see what their experience with Xano has been. Super. I think that's a good one. I've been hearing this all the time. What about edge functions? Can't I just use an edge function? Why do I need Xano?
Sure. Edge functions, or more generally, serverless functions, are what I would have used all the time back in 2019.
Yeah.
And they do the job. They work fine. Supabase offers their own serverless. They call them edge functions. You have the AWS offers them, Google offers them, DigitalOcean offers them, Azure. I mean, everybody has their own version of these serverless functions, which is basically they give you a URL, you can call it, it will run a bit of code, it will deliver value back to you. And those things can work really quite well. They have their own challenges in terms of organization and what have you, but probably the biggest thing about them is they're all written in code, right?
Yeah.
And they are also written in code and solving problems that are a little bit more challenging for AI to understand.
Yeah.
So right now, AI does a really good job understanding how to do UI stuff, but this kind of business logic stuff, especially when you care about it with a great deal of precision, becomes a little bit more challenging, right? And so like maybe the AI is going to be getting better at that, and that will cause more competitive advantage towards doing it more in the serverless function or edge function approach. But right now I'm finding that I will use kind of something that looks like what you have, which is I'll use the NoCode for the structuring of the overall flow of it, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm using lambdas, right? I mean, I'm dropping into like just enough code to deal with these more complex. I'm dealing with an SDK or doing some math or whatever that works better in code than it does outside. And because the thing is structured this way, the ownability of it goes way up because I'm not spending my code lines on table stake stuff and trying to get people to understand everything to understand anything. Now you can understand a lot by looking at the structure and like, wait, hey, here's a little hard bit. Great. I'm just going to skip over that and go to the next line. Totally fine, because you can still get the overall understanding of how the logic works without having to be, committing to learning how to read Python or TypeScript in order to do it.
I really like this approach that Xano is taking. It takes ownability to the next level. You only have to focus on the hard parts, and you do the other parts the smart way. And you save lots of time. And that's actually what it is. The idea of Xano is you're going to spend $50 more on the software to save 2,000 less on developers. That's the idea. That's why I like Xano. It adds up at the end of the day.
That is, I think, key to any tool choice or automation choice is like, you're spending a bit more in order to not pay for the most expensive thing possible, which is human labor.
Yeah. So I think now is a good time. We're halfway in this.
Yeah.
To get guests in here that have been using Xano, have been doing tremendous stuff in it. Mm-hmm. Let's get that all started out. We got Tara inside of here, and we got Jack, and they're in the same room, even though he got a nice background. So I'm not going to put him on mute, that you can hear him through Tara's microphone. But they've been using Xano, and they've been building some incredible stuff with it. They don't have the background of being the developer. They worked with developers before. And I think this is the target audience for Xano. And this is really where Xano empowers people to build creative and tremendous stuff that they would have to go to a developer who doesn't understand them, to then spend lots of money and time to build something that they don't like, to then just start over again. And this is actually the point where they are right now. And Xano has been empowering them to do some exciting stuff. So without further ado, Tara, Jack, thank you so much for being here. And we're excited to hear, kind of like of a little bit of your journey. How has it been working with Xano? And, just tell us everything. Oh, I think we need to get Jack on here. Yes, we can hear you now.
You can hear me now? Okay. Hey, guys. Hi, Ray. Hi, Yasin. And Tara is actually sitting right behind.
Hello, guys. You guys can hear me.
Yeah, you might be able to hear it from here. So if there is like a voice overlap, please let me know.
Perfect.
Tara, do you want to start with your own, or should I just go through, get mine out of the way, and then you can continue? Because she's the main developer. Yasin, you probably know a little bit more.
Yes.
That she takes care of that logic. We want to own the intellectual property. Do you want to explain that later, Tara? What do you want to do?
Yeah, you can quickly start, and then I can take over.
So I would like to start this by first, you got to have some sort of domain expertise in what you're doing, in my opinion. And we are coming from non-technical backgrounds. The biggest issue that we face is actually not the concept of trying to learn stuff, but being dependent on other people. And this was one of the main reasons why we kept failing, even though I don't want to blame others. It's my mistake that I had to wait on someone or rely on someone to get me to the places that I wanted to go as a non-technical person. And that cost me, guys, like my life savings, right? We were supposed to go through that whole journey of having kids, owning a house, and buying mom more, whatever, and then die happily after. That didn't happen because even though we were using offshore services, we were giving money to people expecting that the product was going to be done. and then it was just taking. You guys know the process. Essentially, what happened was we kept failing, and then one day it was around the COVID time. We said, you know what, we got to learn some stuff, man. We can't just rely on people. We're in lockdown. Probably the world will come back. So while we have this time, let's start learning. So I started with the classic HTML journey, whatever. And then I was able to find someone in the places that I was lacking easier. But again, I was relying on the person to build the product. Essentially, what happened was, fast forward, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to have anyone. It has nothing to do with equity split, because I was very generous to offer equal, if not more sometimes. But we need to have some sort of ownership. The second I made that decision, which is incredibly hard for me at that time, I realized that there are tremendous amount of opportunities out there for people like us. You have Ray's community, you have Yasin's community, and thousands of others or more people that are experienced or willing to teach you every single thing. And essentially, if you understand your business, if you understand the kind of value that you're providing people, and I'm not talking about the hype stuff, like have a nicer background app or something like that, but actual value that you provide people, I think every tool is there for you to build. Now, moving towards the business logic of things, Xano was incredibly helpful versus Supabase, because I don't have to learn anything, right? I could just literally use my human language to choose particular blocks and then start building it. Now, for technical people, mainly what I'm hearing is, yeah, but it's a lot more expensive. You can get it done faster. Well, the goal for me is not to save money as a limited resourceful person, that I'm a solo or like a dual entrepreneurs. The main goal is to generate more revenue, not to just preserve cash that, like limit my spending. I want to get stuff done as fast as possible, being less dependent on people with as less maintenance as possible. That's the goal for most of the entrepreneurs. But the second, when you say, all right, like it's much cheaper to go through Supabase because you can actually write the same thing and it will be fractional of the cost. Well, if your goal is to constantly save money, how could you think about the growth, right? So the abundance is there, but you just have to get into the right mindset. So that's my experience with building stuff, but some might agree, some might not. And I guess it depends on where you're in your journey. If you are a technical person that is working for a massive company, of course, your priorities are going to be different. But if you're just launching an MVP and you want to get it out there as soon as possible, and you don't have any resources, and you're not technical, unlike you guys, like what's the option, right? What do you need to do over here? My goal, get it out there as fast as possible, as less maintenance as possible, and start your journey. Because the real problem starts when you're actually selling, not building. That's what I realized. You build stuff, it's amazing, right? Like my wife makes amazing meals, but you guys have no idea about it because she's not selling them. Like nobody knows about it. So, it's good for me, but I don't pay I don't pay her for that, right? So that's my experience, guys. I don't know if it was helpful for some people. Hopefully it is.
I think it is helpful for a lot of people, because I think I think there are way more people like you watching this that are asking themselves those questions. Which way should I go? Should I sacrifice some of my time because people on Reddit say you should use Supabase and no code can't scale? Or should I use tools like Xano to get it out there faster and see if there's a market for it? And can I even scale with that, right? I think those are the questions we see all the time. And I think, me and Ray, we can show you all the specs and all the technical stuff, why it's actually a good way of doing it. But I think as long as we tell that, there will always be like, I'm not sure. They run their communities. Maybe they just say that to get us in there.
Yeah. I can definitely understand.
Also, it doesn't help that Ray has the Xano logo in the background and a blue t-shirt.
yeah, it looks like he's being sponsored, isn't it? But he's not. He's not. Yeah. And he does have great videos and comments that I found on internet about like Firebase authentication, which I think many people will have to go through that pain. Xano authentications versus Firebase authentication, stuff like that. So yeah, he made me an advocate for Xano.
And you're also part of his community. How do you like it so far at Ray's community?
Well, I'm surprised. You've been doing it for a while, Ray. I didn't know, right? I had no idea. But the waltz, I mean, I could just type exactly what I want, and then I could find any kind of stuff there, like with Tara, because we're building. Other than that, you're very responsive. So thank you for that. I don't know how you manage it, if it's AI or you. But you post something and then you get something like, "Is this a bot?" Maybe he has some innate then running at that level. That I don't know. But yeah.
If you're also interested in taking a look at Ray's community, scan the QR code on your screen and join StateChange.ai. If you're stuck at anything Xano, N8N, Supabase, he is the one to help you get unstuck. Yeah. But I would also be super excited and super appreciative to hear what your experience with it has been, Tara, because you've been doing actually the heavy lifting, working on it. We've been doing this in our office hours as well. So I would love to, kind of get your point of view on Xano and, kind of how it empowers you to do exciting stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Hello, everybody. First of all, thank you very much, Justin, for inviting me. This is going to be, I think, my first public speech about this project Xano and all the technical part, because I can say 3 months ago, I didn't know anything about the Xano Webflow, Total, Flutter Flow, nothing. I'm a real estate agent. And me and Jack, we were just an entrepreneurs. We have organizing skills. We are using these CRM systems, and we just want to come up with some ideas for the real estate agents and start our application building journey like with this and with the different developers. So we did maybe 3 or 4 different projects in the different categories and work with different companies, partners, developers, coders, no coders. And then every single time, because I was doing the entire wireframe, there's always a communication problem. I never ever reflect on what we need to do with this app. And all the developers, I'm always saying, okay, they don't understand me. They don't understand the logic. They cannot build what I want. They cannot figure out, you build something and you miss the back button, you miss the cancel button, so they don't think. That was my problem back then. And we always hear that one of the founder needs to be technical in order for you to become a successful product owner. I never ever understand what does that mean until this time. Because 3 months ago, I start my journey with Yasin, with the help of the Yasin. We work with someone else, and then we realize I need to take care of everything. And I start learning from the scratch, the JSON files, the Lambda functions, database, what does that mean, how we can function it, no-code tools like Total, Nordcraft now, Flutter Flow. So we experience so many different things, and we start something. And building the product for contractors, for homeowners, for construction industries. In that product, we have very complicated functions, and it's really tough for a no-coder person, especially like someone for me. I cannot find how can I manage it. I know in human language how can I describe it, but I need to implement it to my product. So with Xano, what I really like about it, first, when I started to work with Xano, I had 10 databases. Like everything's so simple, one-to-one, one-to-one. And now, today I'm rebuilding my database. Now I have 3 databases, 3 main databases, and it has everything inside it. I have the Lambda functions. Now I'm masking the some data inside the Xano. I'm doing some security stuff. I'm creating my own Lambda functions, and everything's over there. I really like it because what I'm thinking, I put it in that function stack. And I put something here, everything's operated inside that function stack, and I can send it to my front end, which is very helpful for me as a no-coder person. I completely I understand every single thing. I can search and find some videos about it. It's very clear language for me, and English is not my main mother language, and it's completely easy to understand. I don't need additional terminology, and of course with the help of the AI. But the biggest things, you cannot rely on the AI only. You need to think about it, which Xano gives you that enough platform to think and write it down under the functions to have whatever you want it from it. So it's amazing tool for me, and I can say Yasin knows, and some of the friends from our community knows that as a woman, I built a product within 2.5 months by myself. And 3 months ago, we worked for one hard coder. We worked for this specific product, one hard coder person and one designer, plus Jack and me. Now, I can see 90% of the things at the back end I did by myself with the help of Xano, of course, Yasin, and the communities, and now hopefully with the Ray.
Congratulations. That's exciting to hear.
Well done.
Thank you.
Yes, I think it's a very empowering message for lots of people to show them that, you don't have to be technical to get started. The only thing you have to do is start though. Like most people get stuck at starting. They think about, I got this app idea, I want to build it. I know how to do it. But, they're like, is this the right thing? I think too many people get stuck in planning and like, should I use this or should I use that? And you hear this person talk about this not being scalable. I think the best thing you can do is get started. Even if you start in the wrong direction, at least you know which direction you shouldn't go anymore. I think that's something very valuable that we got from their story, because if you just start, you'll eventually get to the goal.
I agree. And I want to add, sorry, Ray, go ahead.
I was just going to ask a quick question of Tara. I'm curious whether, like, if we were sort of rewind the clock, like back to being in school or earlier days, did you ever have any coding experience?
No, zero. But my mom, my uncle, my entire family, they're like very old hard coders. They coming from they work with IBM and Microsoft. And my mom always told me, I never ever want you to get into the software industry, because I remember back then they were dealing with the AS400s and all the logics, and like they got a phone call and they're like, oh my God, we have a bug, we have to fix it, and they got stuck in the office for maybe 2 days, 3 days, nonstop. And she was like, no, I don't want to teach you anything about it. Just find something else for you. And to be honest with you, this is a very special things for me, but I want to share with you guys. My mom, we're from Turkey, and she was working for, she's the one of the first barcode systems and the CRM systems who built in Turkey for the biggest companies. She was working with the IBM and Microsoft. And my uncle, she's one of the training person in the IBMs. So when I first started getting to this journey, because I don't have any code background, 2 months ago, she told me that you're never able to do that. You're never ever gonna do it by yourself because you don't have any code background. You always need someone. You're depending on someone. She highly discouraged me. And for 2 months, I didn't mention anything about it. I didn't show the product I made it. And now, maybe she still doesn't know, but now I know the database. I have my own product. I can write the Lambda functions. Basic ones I can do it by myself, but the complex one I need to rely on the AI. Now I have something in my hands. And so zero background, nothing about the code.
That's very impressive.
Thank you.
So it was in the water, but not in your training. Around you, you're surrounded by code, but I think but that's such a. First of all, I love the story. And I think also sort of speaks to like the demographic moment we're in, right? We're like, hey, sure, we haven't actually been trained in this stuff on a more formal basis, but you've had the idea this is a possible thing, right? It's not something that people like you can do, as opposed to many of us who are, come in like, oh, well, tech, that's done by people over there, right? And like, this was sort of, inside. I think this is, and the technology that sort of allows us to fulfill that promise is what I find very, very exciting about this. So I really appreciate you sharing your story.
We actually have the
Thank you very much.
I've been following Tara's progress, and it's impressive. To do what she's done in 3 months, you need at least 2 years of learning code. And
Who is this?
That's Daniel, who was also an officer.
Oh, Daniel, thank you.
I think you're doing amazing. And then someone, Daniel, again, 100% spot on. And then he also said, oh, love these guests.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you. One thing that I wanted to add, guys, I think this is going to be very important for entrepreneurs as well. One thing I noticed, because I failed so many times, which I'm grateful for, now I can say there was one quote that it really touched me. I think that was by Warren Buffett, where he says, it matters not how hard you row, but it's a matter of which boat you're in. So before I had ideas that it was just like, I wanted to build something. The MVP wasn't feeling like it was enough. So that's why I needed to get more people involved where it was supposed to be more technical. Then I noticed if what you're solving is truly valuable, that people would really pay money. They would really want to get into your space, like Ray's community or Yasin's community, because the alternative is incredibly expensive to get help from someone else to have a technical person in your side. I mean, you're not going to think twice, even though if the interface is shitty, it doesn't look nice, whatever, which I'm not saying it does look good for you guys, but even if it was like simple as, I don't know, like a basic HTML div there, like join, people would click. So sometimes we get confused that we get hyped. Oh, I should use the best tool, this and that. However, one thing I notice is if it's a bus, if it's a car, or if it's whatever, Ferraris, Lambos, whatever, you just need to get to that space. And don't get stuck so much in the tool that you're going to use, but focus on the end goal. Maybe this is going to come like a super business oriented person, like a mentality. And I don't want to say that. However, I also made a huge mistake by jumping into the fancy schmancy, shiny object syndrome products. Hey, let's use this. Hey, let's use Make. Let's use NA10. Let's use Manus, because like, oh, it's like the DeepSeek is the new thing. Just, use a tool that you understand, that is simple, and then move on, right?
But I think one thing that is important among all of us shiny object suffering people that suffer from shiny object syndrome, I know lots of people who've been jumping from front end to front end to front end to front end to front end. You just jumped to Flutterflow, actually. So you're jumping all the time too. Did you ever consider jumping away from Xano?
No. Tara is probably going to talk better, because as we
he's going to hit you if you say yes.
Yeah.
No. Even so, that's my baby, the Xano, and sometimes.
Yeah, there you go.
So no. Even sometimes Jack wants to add something inside the Xano. I'm like, no, that's my territory. You cannot get into it. That's my function. That's my logic, and I'm trying to explain it to him, and like he cannot understand. I'm like, I can understand it. Don't jump into my territory.
Two more weeks and he's going to understand it, because it's so simple to understand. But also I think Xano got to level up a little bit more on the collaboration tools, so you can kind of like merge a little bit, like WeWeb actually now has it, where you can see the code edits and all that kind of stuff. I think there's some improvement for that. Maybe Supabase has a little bit better role management system going on. But yeah, I think this shows what's possible with Xano, with that technology. And thank you so much, Tara and Jack, for being here. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
And yeah, Ray, do we want to bring this to a slow ending for now?
I think I really appreciate the your all perspectives today, and yeah, I think that's a real high note for us to end on.
Wonderful. Let's thank you so much all for joining. And Ray, so let's get this. to an end here today, and we just off-boarded Tara and Jack. Thank you all for joining here. But we got some comments from Ellie, a state change and NoCode ProCode member, because there isn't really any alternative. I'm not completely sure, for NoCode.
I think for backend is there are alternatives. I think Xano right now is very much best in class. We talked about N8N before. There's another product out there called BuildShip, which is good for that kind of backend logic. But then once you get outside of that, you really are talking much more about putting either code together or stitching together like an Airtable backend or what have you that has a different quality to it.
Yes.
So and I think it's a business challenge, like the vibe coding front end. Woo, it looks fancy. I can get lots and lots of customers, and they just climb so fast, right? There's lots of money to be made. Whereas on the back end part, like it only works as a business if you're going to ship the product. All these little don't really make any money, and and that I think is a tricky thing, right, for being able to be successful in this the back end logic business. And yet, it's where all the value is if you do ship.
Also, people really love this topic. What's up, everybody? Psyched to see this convo happening. I think Xano versus Supabase has been something people have been asking all the time. Nobody has been doing it before. I mean, Xano wrote a blog article about it, but even I have to say it's a little bit biased, and I'm usually the one who's a little bit biased. But I think this has been a great conversation about highlighting what's possible, how Xano adds value to it. Now, my question to Ray is, you've been working on the hardest parts of NoCode. Lots of people who are in state change use Supabase, actually. We now have the success story with Xano. What are the success stories and the use cases for Supabase would make more sense?
Yeah, so Supabase is going to make a lot of sense, particularly if you are scaling hard, because it scales well upward. I mean, look, there's a story where Supabase is great if you're super, super tiny because it can keep all your costs low because it's all serverless. But those stories aren't that interesting to me. Like, I think if you're building a successful business, like where Supabase is very fast, it's very scalable, so you can start running up a bigger database. Supports things like sharding. It does that stuff really well. And then it also supports more advanced features that are built into PostgreSQL. Like it's much better for full text searching. Say Xano has a little bit of support for full text searching, which is basically based on multi-word selection, whereas Supabase supports something called trigrams, which is a bit more technical, but basically it's that way you can look up part of a word and it finds it, more like tokens. And so it has better, search engine type capabilities. And and people have talked about the RLS. Some people really like the way they do that configuration as being a good way of doing things. And its SDK is fantastic. That's a key difference right now between Supabase and Xano, is that Supabase is programmable. And actually, using Xano to program Supabase is a really interesting use case. But that programmability and that idea, like, hey, you can tell your Supabase what to do and how it's going to set itself up and run these big things not through going through its UX, through its user interface, but through using its APIs and SDKs is, I think, a real competitive advantage. And another thing we've seen in state change is as people grow, the amount they need no code goes down because they're comfortable, with expressing things directly to the machine. And JavaScript and Python, they're not that complicated as languages go. So they were designed to be easy to use. And so as you climb that curve, you find yourself, okay, well, I could use code. So now instead of it's I can do this with no code versus code, it's what is the best way for me to do this? And that and when we start having those kinds of questions, now we're creating real value.
Yeah. And I think the way you get there most of the times for many people is by starting with something out like Xano. Mm-hmm. Like your poster child is Camir.
Yep. Right. Camir is a member of our community who also came in.
I would love to have him in here, one of our next podcasts, if we can get that arranged. Because he is awesome. A prime example from no code to code.
Yep.
He's not using Supabase though. Right?
He's not using Supabase. He's using the old competitor for Supabase, which is called Firebase, which is a Google product.
Hey.
But even then he's like, well, I need to move off of this and considering whatever, because as he has, and he is running a real business. He's a financier. He's, doing things for like doing, a product for like, leverage buyouts, kind of things private equity firms do. And he is, and it's all about the math, right? And trying to orchestrate being able to do this complicated math so that people can make better decisions about where they're going to spend tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah. We got another comment from Ellie. I think once they introduce cheaper pricing to compete with Supabase, then the conversation would be completely different.
Yeah, it's not really going to compete with Supabase. What's going to happen is they're going to offer a new low-end pricing, right? Which will allow you to break in and make a very tiny app, right? To my understanding, the high end, the Xano hasn't changed its architecture, right? So it's not going to a serverless model where it will scale elastically, right? It's still going to have this big step function thing going on. It's just that they're going to offer a tinier, even lower capacity first tier. And that will be cheaper, right? And that'll be more affordable. More people will be able to do it. And I think there's a reasonable point in there. But unlike Supabase, which can offer a completely trivial starting point, Xano kind of can't, just because the way that the architecture works. And a interesting question to me is whether them dropping the prices the way that, at least I've gotten the hint that they're dropping prices, I'm not totally read in on the initiative, is going to meaningfully change the way the economics work.
I think so too. With Xano, you got to get your machine, and they will have a easier entry to get your foot into the door of having that machine, which for most applications, if you're right now with Supabase, because you can be on the $20 plan and you are having like 50 user on your application, and you're in Supabase because you're concerned about scale, which I think in itself is funny. Because let's first get someone to the application before we worry about scale. But of course, you want to plan for scale. Makes sense. I think if you're in that position where you use Supabase because it's $29 or $25, and you say, you know what, I could save myself some time. I could save myself some AI headache. I don't like to scream at ChatGPT anymore when it does my Lambda functions. Maybe when they start getting the robots walking in the street, they're going to, put me on their hit list because I'm always screaming at AI or something like this. If you consider, having an alternative that's similarly priced, I can't talk about the pricing, but it will be, how much Supabase is costing, expected to pay the same on Xano moving forward. That would be the lower entry point. That is if you got 100 users, 200 users, you're using Supabase right now because it's cheap, and you're on the paid plan because you want some of the extra features and you want the convenience from Xano, that's good. The moment you're at 2,000 users or 1,000, you probably want to upgrade to $99. But then you probably also want to upgrade with Supabase to get some features like GDPR, all that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, it just provides you an easier way to get your foot into the door. Supabase has been doing this, but the way they scale allows them to do it differently because it's serverless. They have one big server and it all goes through there. So Xano is just giving you like a little tinier piece of the server to get your foot into the door. But most people but it's actually what most beginners that start their application in Xano need. So they're lowering the barrier to entry. And I think that is essentially what's going on. And then the nice thing about Xano is if you implement things like load balancing, make your workflows more efficient, you can run, I think, a far away with the 20. I can't talk about the pricing with the cheaper plan.
Yeah. I'm really curious to see how the new pricing gets used, but even more than that, I'm curious like how the different functionality, how Xano is going to be used in the coming couple of quarters here.
One said that's actually a good question. If NoCode isn't an issue, what's the better option? So if you don't care about code or NoCode, Supabase or Xano. They're really trying to pinpoint us down here.
Yeah, well, it's about the job done. Like I thought, Tara talking about like her, having grown up in an environment where they're, writing in Fortran for, AS400 machines and like, the kinds of things like you're lucky you fit into a small room. I mean, it's AS400 actually isn't that big, but but that idea of being able to work with the technology that makes the most sense at the time, I think is really where the exciting opportunities are here. And and if you're into using, I don't know, like Amazon Web Services, right? I mean, a lot of what you're controlling in terms of managing your infrastructure is through its console, right? There's a story to be told about how a lot of the things that we think of as being relatively high end are actually very no code. AAA video games are made using something called Unreal Engine 5. Right, Unreal Engine 5 is its main language is called Blueprints. It's a no-code boxes and arrows logic building system. So there are lots of environments in which these no-code tools or visual development tools or whatever you want to call them. In fact, the variances on them are appropriate. Right, are the best tool for that. Not just like easy to use, but like, hey, this is the best way to express, and then you add in that little bit of text-based code to solve a particular problem. And that model is not like unique to Xano or unique to the class of no-code tools that came out starting in 2021. It is something we've been seeing evolving in software since the days of client server in the mid 1990s.
And OutSystem is making lots of money doing enterprise no-code stuff, and lots of people
absolutely, as Mendix and Appian and Boomi, and there's an area called business orchestration and automation technologies. It's called the BOAT. It's a whole sector for enterprise, what we would probably call enterprise no code.
You would be surprised how much big enterprise software used by the biggest company out there is actually just no code.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense to orchestrate things this way, and this is really getting to Ellie's question, right? Like, if it's not the issue, what do you use? And the answer is, it often makes a lot of sense to be using something no-code-ish to be describing this kind of string together logic. It often makes a lot more sense to be using code for certain jobs. You use whatever the right tool is, but rather than like saying you have to, you have to eat your vegetables, you got to have everything to be in code if you have anything in code, or you're committed to using Xano's weirdo no-code language in order to get anything done. You can mix them up. And that mixture, that allows you to put strength against weakness. And that is really how you get a lot of leverage from this. When I think about Tara's story and like how much she's able to do through organizing the databases, right? Through a no-code interface, which is the way everyone would do it. Being able to express a lot of logic here using this, visual development stack interface, which I think is really the number one value proposition of Xano is in this function stack. And then as she gets into more complicated stuff, being able to bring in that bit of code, like not like having to write thousands of lines of it, but be able to have just the right 20 lines that does value. I know people who make $1 million a year, and their job is to drop the right 20 lines of code into these environments for things like customer success or digital enablement for like large banks to be able to make their websites and their online tools work. And the reason is that it's not about writing thousands of lines or all the weird stuff. It's like, what part matters, and being able to focus on just that part that matters. That's the promise of these tools.
And that's exactly what you can do in Xano. You get your variables, you get your API calls, you get your building blocks for the things that make sense. And then where you start doing your secrets, you get your Lambda functions, drop in the 30 lines of code, import any from the millions and millions of NPM packages, use it in there, modify it, build your own package, import it if you like. You're good to go. You got, like, it's not about having fancy code, and it's not about writing code that makes you a good programmer. It's about actually writing less code and writing better code that solves the problems that people are willing to pay for.
So we have one more comment in the queue here that I think really speaks to that dichotomy you just raised. So maybe we could have you take on answering Des' question.
If I had to choose 100% code, the opposite has to be visual. Would you do it for the front end or the back end? That's a very good one. I think most people have the assumption, we had that in the Discord conversation, it kind of like it got a little bit out of hand, because it is a passionate topic. People are passionate about the way they build stuff. But if I had to choose 100% code, front end or back end, I would never write code on the back end, because the back end is how I mean, we're doing the right code on the back end, but I would choose code on the front end, no code on the back end. And I would choose Xano all the time if I had to choose, because that's actually what we're doing, in Despia. In Despia, we have the whole backend built on Xano, and we got the things connected to Code Magic and do all that stuff in code that needs to be done. We'll connect them as a microservice, bring them back in as a function into the Xano interface. Xano lets us orchestrate only the code that matters, that makes us unique to all the competitors. And it lets us put this code in loops, in conditional statements, in this easy to restructure database, in this easy to restructure function stack. Because what you don't know about Despia is we're every day, almost every second day at least, almost sometimes even every day, rebuilding the Despia endpoints, creating new Despia endpoints, new versions for them. First of all, our version control is pretty bad because we just keep creating new endpoints in Xano. We kind of need to probably upgrade to enterprise to get some more features. But the way we do it is because the code Despia generates always has to change based on all the updates that Apple has been doing, all the features we're adding to it. So if I were to do this in code, I would always have to rewrite the whole function for all the stuff that doesn't matter, the loops, everything. I got to make sure the syntax is working. Xano allows us to just go into the function stack, get this thing out, put this new thing in, change that file, add that, app clip file, put it together, done, send that to Code Magic. So this orchestration on the backend, because that's where we're making the money. If we were to put a Despia API out there, people would pay for it. The front end is not critical to Despia being functional. Now, it's different if you take a look at Toddle. The front end is a completely different thing for the Nordcraft Toddle company, because they are making money by providing you a front-end tool. So their critical business logic is on the front end. And they don't care, using Xano or Supabase, because the critical things, the JSON you're building that builds your application happens on the front end. With Despia, all the magic is on the back end. That's where we do the code signing. That's where we build the files together. We're actually putting 2,000 files together in Xano, and we're still on the $300 plan, which works great. Like Daniel was like, we should go to enterprise. So even though I don't have to, it's just he's making it look very attractive to us. But we don't have to, and that's the nice thing about Xano. It's your choice. So I would never go away from using Xano for the backend. I would rather rebuild the front end of Despia and React, vibe code it, because if I know that if the backend is right, I don't have to worry about it. That's my answer to that. Right, Ray, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I would add that the AI is really good at making front-end code. AI is all about training. Okay, it is a token-seeking parrot. It knows largely what it's read in the past, and the more it's read, the better it knows it. And so when it goes and it ingests all of GitHub, which is basically how they work, whatever has the most code in there is the thing that's going to be smartest about. Right, so it can do a lot of languages, but like you have some weirdo language, it doesn't know how to do it. But you have a language that it's seen a little bit of before, a little bit can do it, but it's seen a lot of it before. And what is in GitHub more than just about anything else, particularly as it's built up over the course of the last 15 years? React. That's React. Right. So so it knows React really, really well. It knows Python okay, and as a result, that front end code it can generate with a great deal of skill. There's a whole lot of Tailwind out there from the course of the last 10 years. Great. It knows its way around Tailwind. You can use Tailwind for a lot of control. So in fact, when I am building for the front end, I am largely writing code at this point. I don't use that much in the way of no-code builders anymore, even to the point that the State Change AI site I recently built out using Cursor Cursor and Windsurf together to go build out a Next.js site, relatively simple one, because then what I focus on is the writing on it. Right? Like what's the messaging that I'm going to be doing for people, sharing the assets, what have you. But the actual, superstructure of the website of it, just allow it to be, if you will, vibe coded. But I really don't like that term because it implies you're turning off your brain. I mean, but it's just sort of putting the technology to work. And I found that I was able to move really, really fast that way But where I wanted to maintain control and have precision is going to be the logic, deciding what happens when people do X, doing things like there's an allusion before to like state change vault, which has resources on like from all of our almost 1,000 events we've done over the course of the last 2 years plus, and all of those are those actions are being controlled through business logic. That business logic is being run through Xano, and that would continue to choose to use that kind of visual tool for doing the back end. And to use code and allow the AI to be writing the vast majority of code for me on the front end.
So you're sticking with code on the back end? You're sticking with no code on the back end, with Xano on the back end,
Yep.
Code on the front end, because that's where AI can serve you best. I like that. That's what we're doing too. Most of my Turtle projects are a mix out of random frameworks put together thanks to ChatGPT to get things to work that I'm a little bit too lazy to figure out how to do natively in Turtle. So, I think my Turtle projects have more in common with your Cursor projects than anybody else's Turtle projects.
You can tell that we enjoy talking with each other because it was almost half an hour ago that we said we should bring this into.
I thought we were like 20 minutes or so. Perfect. Now, everybody watching, take a look at State Change AI. I think it's definitely worth it. If you're using WeWeb, if you're using Xano, Supabase, BigQuery, whatever you do, if you're building an application right now or consider doing it, you want to make sure you get it set up the right way from the start. Ray is incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to everything out there. You don't want to miss out on his guidance. You can start getting his guidance as soon as today for the small price of $39 a month. Essentially, you can get the State Change app on your phone, on your computer, and you can always have a mini version of Ray in your pocket with you to ask him when you have a question.
My goodness, that's a high standard to live up to. But Yassine, can we make sure we put up NoCode Pro Code for a second here?
Sure. If you care about making fancy buttons, no, we also do a little bit of back-end stuff. I mean, a little bit too much, but I like doing the back-end because Xano is so enjoyable. No, but if you're committed into using Xano, if you're committed into building your application, also making what's connected with Xano look pretty, and dealing with front-end NPM packages, and you want to get some libraries into your front end, you're using Nordcraft or WeWeb, right? Because I felt my way around hacking stuff into WeWeb now, so I'm good with WeWeb. If you consider that, take a look at that. We're pretty front-end focused, but it's more like, how do we get the data from the backend on the front end? How do we get the proper data from the front end to the backend, and how we do the things on the backend? Now, it's a little bit more holistic approach. It's more expensive to start with than Ray. So I think if you're just looking for general advice on how to structure things, I think Ray is probably a better option. But if you kind of like want to have, the daily help, if you're a beginner, you have lots of questions, you want to join our daily office hours, make like Tara the best use out of that, take a look at nocodeprocode.com. Yep. But regardless on if you join or not, we'll keep doing this amazing podcast here because it's so enjoyable, and we can't wait to get all of your questions, comments, answer them, and talk about great tools like Xano and WeWeb and Nordcraft.
And next time we need to have like the Viking hat show up whenever
we I gotta see if Party City is open or if they only have open during Halloween. But I'll take a look at that.
Fantastic. Yassine, it's been joy again talk to you today.
Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure talking to you. I also want to thank Tara and Jack, who are probably watching right now, even though we kicked them off. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story. We really appreciate that. And thank you for, watching us. Let us know in the comments what you think about this format. Do you want to see more of this? And thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And give us a like and a thumbs up, and comment, share, subscribe, whatever other YouTubers tell you to do. We'll just ask you to do the same thing.
Fantastic. See you in a week.
Thank you so much. See you in a week.